Hi everyone, welcome back. So today I am going to be talking about how massage can help those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, you may have seen my previous video on how massage can help those who have suffered domestic abuse. That video is very much related to this one. So if your PTSD is due to domestic abuse, I'd say go and watch the domestic abuse video as well as this one. But this will also be applicable to anyone who has suffered trauma, whether it be, maybe a car accident or a house fire, or maybe if you've been in the military and you've suffered PTSD through through events that have happened while you've been in action. So as you will know, if you have seen my a video on domestic abuse, this is something that's quite personal to me. I have had PTSD for about 10 years now, and sort of with that comes long-term stress and depression issues. And yeah, I just kind of really saw how beneficial massage was just in the last year, when I was fortunate enough to have a work colleague help me overcome one of my biggest triggers. For me, it was probably the biggest thing was I couldn't have anyone touch around my neck, and that was as a result of domestic abuse. Consequently, when I went for a massage, I felt unable to have any work done around my neck, which of course is one of the areas that really carries a lot of tension. But also for me, in terms of forming relationships, it was actually very difficult. And I'll give you an example. I'd started to date someone, and it was very, very early stages, and hadn't sort of got to that point where I'd sort of unloaded all my baggage and explained about sort of the past experiences that I'd had. And he was being just affectionate, and not sort of really understanding the effect that it would have. And he put his hand just around the side of my neck, which resulted in me having a full-blown flashback. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, had trouble breathing, and all I could see, even though there was nothing wrong with what he did, all I could see was basically being pushed up against a wall and having someone's hand around my neck. So, but thankfully he realised very quickly, and he dealt with it incredibly well. But yeah, massage really helped me overcome that, which is something that I never thought I would be able to say, to the point that now I wouldn't say I really like being touched on my neck, but it doesn't result in me having a full-on flashback. So which obviously in relationship sense and in terms of going for a massage, it's really made a big difference. So anyway, back to PTSD. I'm just going to sort of give you a few statistics again. So there was a survey done of more than 8,000 subjects, And in this study, it was found that 6.5% of these subjects basically had a lifetime prevalence of PTSD, and another 2.8% had sort of a pretty short-term, sort of 30-day prevalence of PTSD. Women are 50% more likely than men to develop PTSD. Now, whether that's due to the much higher incidence of domestic abuse against women, you'll have seen from my other video on domestic abuse that 85% of domestic abuse cases are towards women. So possibly that explains the higher incidence of PTSD among women. But those with PTSD were also at an increased risk of developing other psychiatric disorders, so anxiety issues, mood disorders. It's... So why does PTSD occur? Well, okay, so when we go through a traumatic event, we've talked previously about the fight or flight response in the body, which is basically a self-preservation mechanism. It's where the nervous system kicks in, adrenaline, which is one of your stress hormones, will be released. And what that does is it allows you to either physically fight, or run the other way and get away from, the danger. But if the after effects of this aren't dealt with, the initial trauma can have a long-lasting effect, both on the mind and the body. So the PTSD response basically occurs when we attempt to override this fight or flight response. Now that we may do that either because that's what we were trained to do, for example, if you're in the military, or because we just have no other option. So, for example, if your PTSD is due to abuse, it's very common to be in a situation, as I was, where I didn't feel able to fight him off. I was kind of frozen really on the spot when it happened, and I didn't feel able to kind of run and get myself out of there. So that's when this PTSD response kicks in. Because what happens is, if that fight or flight response, if it's not completed, then that surge of adrenaline that comes in to help you deal with whatever it is that's happening, that's got no exit route, because you haven't kind of physically run away. You haven't used that energy in any way, that kind of deals with the trauma there and then. So what then happens is that leaves your body in a state of shock. And I've spoken about shock, the symptoms of and the effects of, in the domestic abuse video. And in the following weeks, or sometimes years, what happens is that slight bursts of adrenaline will occur when sort of similar aspects of this initial trauma take place. So for me, anytime someone touched my neck, I'd be getting these small bursts of adrenaline. While the rational mind, will want to just ignore it and carry on, and kind of subconsciously, I think, knows that it's not the same as that initial trauma, the body is still trying to resolve the effects of the actual trauma because of all this adrenaline that's not gone anywhere. So this can result in various symptoms, sleep disturbances, and nightmares are very, very common. Having flashbacks, obviously, even when you are awake. And I don't think anyone, if you've not been through a trauma and you've not suffered them, I don't think anyone can really understand just how much a flashback takes you over. And there really is nothing you can do in that point in time to overcome it. You just kind of have to ride it out. When PTSD kicks in, you will also be in a kind of a state of almost constant stress, and anxiety, possibly depression, sometimes anger. And quite often, again, people who've not been through it, they don't understand that anger response. PTSD can also cause a lot of irritability, which again, people, like with the anger, people just don't really understand. They just see someone that's maybe responding to things in a sort of inappropriate way, without any understanding of the emotional factors that are behind it. It can also cause chronic pain, chronic fatigue, and all of these physical and emotional pressures. There is a high incidence of suicide among PTSD sufferers, and also of self-harming, which again, I think people find hard to understand. But sometimes if we feel pain on the outside of our bodies, by harming ourselves, we can temporarily sort of trick the brain into redirecting us away from that initial trauma. And so again, it's a coping mechanism, a way of us dealing with the emotional scars of whatever it is, that's happened. But how does massage help with PTSD? Two of the coping mechanisms, sort of provided by the brain during abuse, are depersonalization and dissociation. Since our memories are stored in our tissues, abuse can cause us to retreat from physical touch by another person, even if that comes from someone who cares, for us. Because as I've said, through sort of, if you have a certain trigger with physical touch and then you get the flashback, so it doesn't matter who it is that's doing it, or, even if they're not meaning to cause any harm, if there is no threat, it's the fact that because of what you've gone through, and all that adrenaline that's still in your system, you perceive it as a threat. So even if that's from someone you can still react. And these coping mechanisms will continue until you actually heal the physical tissues, as well as the emotional scars and healing the mind. The brain, it's a sensory organ, and it can't distinguish between a memory and an actual traumatic event. It only works off what we tell it. So if we hear something or feel something, that is a trigger and that recalls that trauma, the brain senses danger. And so it places us right back into the event that caused the damage in the first place. But through massage therapy, we are able to heal that area where the memories are held. Massage has been shown to bring positive biochemical changes, such as the inhibiting the cortisol release, and also release of adrenaline, which is another one of the stress hormones and particularly relevant to PTSD sufferers. And massage also increases those endorphins, such as the serotonin and the dopamine, which will reduce the anxiety and really help to increase feelings of relaxation. Obviously when you're relaxed, you deal with stress in a very different way. Massage will obviously also address, the physical issues, muscles, tendons, all of the soft tissues, and will loosen those areas of tension, which will improve your flexibility. And that will help to avoid those chronic pain problems and chronic issues with the joints, that PTSD sufferers are so prone to. Long-term stress is going to sort of, impact on you physically, but massage will really help to combat this. Again, we've talked about the power of positive human touch, how it triggers the release of oxytocin, which is, the love hormone, if you like. It's one of those endorphins, which again will initiate the relaxation response. And by doing this, all those long-term, those stress patterns that we've kind of held for, sometimes years, can just start to dissolve and allow you to, overcome, that stress response that your body wants to hold on to. So yeah, that is how massage can help with PTSD. It's not something that's going to happen in one session. So, this is one of those issues that, would require certainly at least a few sessions, depending on the extent of the trauma. But yeah, I've experienced the benefits for myself. I'd say to anyone out there who is struggling with PTSD, as hard as it can be to trust someone, give massage therapy a go. And hopefully you will experience the same positive results that I did. I'm not saying it will make everything go away, but certainly, it can help. That's it for today. As always, you can contact me through Facebook or Instagram if you have any questions relating to this video. But for now, it is goodbye from me, and I'll see you next time.